seconds left.
Evans for three. Got it all! Shot clock off, 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three. And a goal!
Bearcat Blitz time on the Believe Network. Thank you all so much for joining us on whatever platform you're checking us out on, whether it's YouTube, Talking Cats with Russ Heltman. You watch the full show there on podcast platforms, Google, Spotify, Apple, all of those good spots. Great place to check us out, where you can find myself, Russ Heltman, and my co-host, Neil Meyer, talking about Bearcats basketball and football. We got the spring game coming up at the end of this week. We got offensive storylines today to close the show and defensive storylines on Thursday to close that show ahead of the big game free event. All Bearcats fans in the area and beyond should come check it out. All you got to do is find parking, pay for parking. Other than that, it's completely free to watch this new look crew of Bearcats at Nippert Stadium on Saturday, I believe at noon. I think that one's getting kicked off at nice and early kickoff time for everybody. Great family event action. And of course, we got the New Heights live show. That is not a free event. Those are paid tickets that you're going to have to snag for the Thursday night festivities with Joe Burrow in attendance. That's going to be very, very fun for everybody in the city. But we got portal news to touch on before that, and a commitment from the class of 2025. Three-star running back Kolin Wilson committed over the weekend. Neil covered that for us on allbearcats.com and covered it on frontofficenews.com. We'll touch on Kolin Wilson's impact and just what the class looks like as we get into the month of April. Before all that, though, got to tell you about Bet Online. It's down to the last 4 teams, and Bet Online has been your tournament bracket headquarters all March long. And now that we're almost down to the finals, we still got a lot more in store. MLB is here, and NBA and NHL playoffs are right around the corner. As always, BetOnline is the #1 source for your summer sports wagering. Head to BetOnline today to stay updated on all the action, and remember to use promo code BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Once again, that's BLEAV. Use that promo code on your first deposit. BetOnline. The game starts here. Neil, Kolin Wilson commits from Gulf Shores, Alabama, becomes the 5th hard commit in the Bearcats class of 2025. It's sitting right around 41st overall nationally. So a strong start for Cincinnati, headlined by running back Zion Johnson, the highest rated player in the class so far. Him alongside Patrick Williams kind of going back and forth in their overall ratings. But to get 2 running backs this early and 2 guys that kind of fit this home run hitter, we're going to do it by committee. We're going to bring a lot of speed and just overall volume at you at the running back and running game position out of this Bearcats offense. It's pretty clear that under Scott Satterfield, they are finding a type of running back that they want to target, and they're targeting the position early and often in these classes of 24 and 25.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Colin White, I mean, guys, if you turn on the film, I think, Russ, we were talking about it the other day after he committed, 2,300 all-purpose yards a season ago, 33 touchdowns. This is a guy who can do it all. I mean, once he gets into the open field, breakaway speed, can make you guys miss, make defenders miss, and he's a viable threat on when the ball is in his hands. I mean, we've seen him line up at running back. Obviously, that's been his natural position, but we've seen him line up at the wide receiver role as well. And Russ, I mean, we've talked about it all the time at spring practices and whatnot, but kind of fits the mold of the dual athlete that Scott Satterfield and this staff really like. They like to get those speed guys that can get out in the open field and make defenders miss. And that's something Colin White does really well. I mean, he led his team with, as we talked about, 2,300 all-purpose yards, 33 touchdowns a season ago, en route to an Alabama 5A state championship. And if there's one thing that Scott Satterfield and this staff have done very well, is they've gone out and gotten not only great people and great players, but great players as well. I mean, look, Russ, everybody that they recruited,
going out and
how many
winners
state championship winners? Yeah, how many state championship winners were in the 2024 class? I believe roughly half of them.
Yeah.
Now you're getting here into the 2025 class. pair him alongside Zion Johnson there in the running back room as your first 5 commits, that running back room in that class 2025 is looking pretty dangerous.
That it is. And when you look at Kolin Wilson zooming in on his game, was able to dive into it more and more over the past day or so. And just home run hitter, man. He operates mostly out of the shotgun. That's really what Gulf Shore's kind of a spread offense. They don't really go under center much, if at all. Every single snap I saw from Wilson, he was in the shotgun or taking snaps from the shotgun formation. So as a home run hitter from that spot, I think is a guy that could fit right into the pistol actions that UC utilizes in the Scott Satterfield offense. So as a guy that kind of fits the mold they're looking for, is versatile at that, can play on special teams, can return kicks to the house, can play as a gunner on special teams, and whether it be punt returns or punt formations on offense or kickoffs on the other side of the ball as well. He can do it all. He can play defense on that side, and he can play offense in terms of special teams. So I think he's a player that could come in and have maybe a role early, potentially, depending on what kind of size he's at coming in as a freshman. We don't know what that's going to look like necessarily. Listed at 5'9", 180 pounds. He's going to have to get a little bigger to be a part of that special teams unit as a freshman for sure. But they're just going for the running backs, man. They're going for the running backs. They're getting these guys with pedigree early. And I think Kolin Wilson, nice addition. Also showed a little ability to catch out of the backfield. I didn't see as much of that on film, not a whole lot of that, but it's there. He can definitely do it when asked and when needed. And just the open field movement, Neil, really stood out from Kolin Wilson. I mean, those cuts in the middle of the open field, he made. I don't know how talented these other teams he was facing. Obviously, Alabama football, like, it's going to be pretty solid talent when you get down there in SEC country. But I mean, he made these guys look like mailmen out there in the middle of the field. Like, the way he's able to cut back and forth, left to right, right to left, going full speed was really, really cool to see. And there were plenty of touchdowns, Neil, out of the 33 on film from his junior season, where he made something out of completely nothing. I saw one touchdown at least in the red zone where he flipped the field going 10 yards all the way to the right, had to go all the way into the backfield, all the way 20 yards to the other side of the field and go back across his blockers because there was just nothing there on the left side. He scored a touchdown out of it. And just 3 or 4 times, he actually went back 5 to 10 yards to avoid the rush, avoid a swarm of defenders, and then still got 10 yards back up the field, got all those yards back, and turned it into a touchdown. So the guy has home run ability. He has that same kind of fitting mold and lightning mold that the Bearcats have basically been eyeing with their running back staff in the portal. When you think about Chance Williams, Evan Pryor, all of those guys that are kind of lightning to Corey Kiner's thunder, and even Kiner himself, Neil, really improved his speed last year, really showed the ability down the stretch of the season. I think he got a little bit better ability of taking angles on those home run shots because he was getting more and more of them than he was used to in his earlier time as a Bearcat. And so I think it's just great to see this staff recruiting what they think their strengths are early in the period for the class of 2025 and beyond. And five commits in, low 40s, high 30s, depending on where you look on the recruiting rankings. Solid start for Cincinnati. Now, can they start stacking the high-end talent? We know UC, and ever since they started under Luke Fickell 6-7 years ago to start really get this recruiting train back on the tracks, we know they can develop. We know they can bring in these 3-star talents and turn them into strong players. The old staff was able to do that. We're still waiting to see that, obviously, with just one class down in the Scott Satterfield era. Will we start seeing some of these 4-stars commit consistently? That's not something we've seen in prior classes. That's the next step for this group to take. But they've already done a good job of, I think, establishing the culture, the identity, and the type of persona and profile that they want their recruits to fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you're looking at it, Russ, with this class, I think it's kind of clear what kind of players they are targeting. And despite a guy like Kolin Wilson only having just a couple of offers, and they're all lower mid-major offers, but if you watch the tape, Russ, you can kind of see what kind of players they're targeting, going after. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how these guys from the 2023 recruiting class play out now that they have the one season under their belt. But Scott Satterfield and his staff are actively working, and I think that's what people are starting to see. 5 commits in the first couple months here of 2024 for the 2025 class. But, Russ, I mean, you look at some of the commits that they've brought in. Look what they were able to do. Brody Drogosh is a key example of that from last year's class. They were able to retain him. Yes, he makes the transition to the linebacker, and it's been an impressive transition if you ask me personally, Russ, but overall, if they can start stacking those kind of caliber players and the development starts to click, things are going to be trending back in the right direction for Cincinnati football, and it could happen very quickly.
Yeah, Kolin Wilson, mostly, like Neil said, almost all non-Power 5 offers, did get an offer from Northwestern, and shows UC over the likes of the Wildcats, Western Kentucky, UAB, Toledo, Air Force. I believe he had an Ivy League offer too, right, Neil?
Yeah, I think he had Harvard.
Yeah, one of the Ivy League schools offered as well. So good to see the Bearcats landing another commitment over the weekend, up to 5 on the board. Zebulon Kinsey, quarterback, 3-star, has committed, along with 3-star cornerback Patrick Williams, 3-star running back Zion Johnson, 3-star wide receiver Kamari Smith, and just most recently, Kolin Wilson, the first player to commit in the past couple of months as a 3-star running back. Neil Meyer, Russ Eltman, your host here on Bearcat Blitz. Let's get to the transfer portal, where a local scoring legend has put Cincinnati among his top schools list as he starts to wind down his transfer portal recruitment. All that and more coming up on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, down to just a few schools remaining for Northern Kentucky all-time leading scorer, Marques Warrick. Cincinnati in that final 5 grouping, along with USC, new head man Eric Musselman, all the Musselman, Arkansas, all that in the news recently with Coach Calipari, just out of nowhere, shocking the college basketball world and taking the open Arkansas job and leaving University of Kentucky. The Southern California Trojans in the mix for Marques Warrick, Missouri in the mix as well, along with Penn State, Cincinnati, and Seton Hall. Neil, your thoughts on Marques Warrick having UC in this final grouping? I would say if he wants to kind of keep it rolling in the 5-1-3 and be able to kind of keep the same kind of comfortable medium here in Cincinnati and in the kind of greater Northern Kentucky area where he was living earlier, Cincinnati would be the pick. And Neil, it's not like there's any heavy hitters on this list. Missouri down, Penn State never really been up. Seton Hall did just come off of they won the NIT, didn't they, over Indiana State and Robbie Avila?
Yep.
From 9, I think they went on a 9-0 run to win that championship game last week.
9-0 run to end it. Yep.
Yeah. And USC just got a brand new coach. They don't have a culture or anything established right now. It feels like, Neil, Cincinnati is the best option out of this group for Marques Warrick. Now, is Marques Warrick the best option for Cincinnati out of this transfer portal group of guards? That is my biggest question, especially when you think just there's not a lot of efficiency for Marques Warrick. He's not a overly efficient player. And when you think about him coming into a group that is going to be by committee again next year, Neil, we know how Wes Miller operates. He does not necessarily key in on usage rate highly for 1 guard or 2 guards at that even. The scoring I expect, and I don't know if you expect this, we'll get your rebuttal in a second, is going to be spread out again. I would expect that to happen in this upcoming season like it was in 23-24, and for the most part in 22-23, although you did have David DeJulius and Landers Nolly a cut above the rest in terms of points per game. Interesting decision here. Interesting decision, and one that I am interested to see how the fan base reacts to if Marques Warrick does ultimately pick the Bearcats. Big development, the first final list grouping of any transfer portal target so far for Cincinnati as they continue trying to replace the likes of John Newman at the guard position, and they're going to have to replace some way, somehow, some kind of depth at the front court spots.
Yeah, absolutely, Russ. And it's really an interesting decision, especially seeing the list that he put out. I mean, you discussed it with Coach Musselman heading to USC. I mean, you're looking at what happened with USC last year. I don't think anybody expected with the talent that they had on their roster that they would finish the season how they did, especially when you have 2 top 100 recruits highlighted by the number 1 overall player in the class of 2023 in Isaiah Collier. But overall, USC didn't have the season they expected. I mean, the only thing that stands out to me about adding USC to that list is that they're going to be without 3-point guards after Bronny James hits the transfer portal. You lose a guy like Boogie Ellis, who is exhausted all of his college eligibility. Then you see Isaiah Collier is going to the league. Bronny James enters the transfer portal. That's like the only option out there is if you want to go out there and looking for a key opportunity to start right away with a new head coach, Eric Musselman. And then Penn State, as you mentioned, Russ, never been up. Missouri, it's had its flaws, but it's been up and down, but it's still a mid-tier program. And then Seton Hall, I mean, he's going right there to the Big East. I mean, Seton Hall has been a program that has had tremendous success over the last few years. Obviously, this past season, probably should have found their way into the NCAA tournament as well, but they go on to win the the NIT tournament. And overall, I mean, the Big East is one of the top 3 conferences in all of college basketball, but it's pretty interesting, Russ, to see him go from right across the river in Alexandria, Highland Heights, Kentucky, to potentially coming right across the river to Cincinnati in a rivalry that he's been a part of, that NKU dominated UC in the 2022-23 season, to NKU getting absolutely blown out here in the past season. So it would be an interesting thing, and it would be curious to see what fans do in the reaction of if that move decides to come from Marques Warrick. But overall, Russ, we're talking the transfer portal, and I know a lot of people are sitting there waiting around thinking something's going to happen soon. But remember when the first commit came last year in the transfer portal? It was Jamil Reynolds, and it happened on April 17th.
Yeah.
We're sitting right now on April 9th. The transfer portal, guys, there's 2,000 entries. Things are going to take time, but if there's one thing that we can say is this coaching staff are targeting as many people as they can. Transfer portal's wild. Everybody knows that. But overall, I mean, they made it a clear priority to reach out to a guy like Marques Warrick based on everything we have seen on social media and whatnot. So overall, I mean, as I'm right there with you, Russ. I mean, could Marques Warrick be the guy that comes into Cincinnati and puts up these numbers he put up in the Horizon League? I don't know.
Maybe. Is it likely? No,
but he provides,
not likely.
But he provides the depth at that point guard position that Cincinnati desperately needed. And that's the veteran leadership, veteran presence. They've been in big games before. He's been to the NCAA tournament. So, I mean, there's certain check boxes he checks. So, overall, I mean, you're looking at it anytime you can add a 2,000-plus scorer to a team, I think any coach is going to be interested. So, it's definitely an interesting site to keep an eye on.
Yeah, just one number to keep in mind here. Negative 3.72 strength of schedule. That's what Marques Warrick faced in his senior season at Northern Kentucky. Averaged 19.9 points on 42.5% shooting and 29.8% from 3. Much worse 3-point numbers than his career average, Neil, which brought it down to 34.7, but it was at 38, 35, 36 his first 3 years in college. So is it just a down year shooting from deep, and that's why he didn't take a leap as a senior against really bad competition? Is that why? Maybe that's what they are assessing. Maybe that's what they assessed in the film breakdown, which they staff obviously much more intensely viewing Marques Warrick than either you or I are. Maybe that's the reason why he didn't take a leap in his final year at Northern Kentucky. But going from a negative 3.72 strength of schedule to an 8.49, roughly, which is what UC faced in 2023-24, and will probably face a little tougher, Neil. I would expect maybe 1 or 2 more difficult games added in the non-conference to try to make sure that Cincinnati can't have that used against them at the end of the season. So closer to maybe a 10 strength of schedule. It's just historically in these transfer situations, it's hard to expect a guy that goes from a mid-major scoring demon to a high level, the highest level of the sport in the Big 12, and expect them to continue scoring 19 points per game, and usually they're doing it efficiently. Marques Warrick is not doing this on an efficient rate in the Horizon League. So a lot of things to try to project and forecast with this development. But like you said, Neil, anytime you can add a player of the year, a bucket getter, a guy who prior to last year was a 36+% shooter from outside on pretty high volume at that. 5.9 attempts, 6.7 attempts, 6.5 attempts. That's CMOS Lukosius volume 3-point numbers right there. Interesting to see. And as we wind down the transfer portal look here, we have some new developments out of Cincinnati. We'll just kind of recap those before we get to our spring game storylines. Cincinnati has really only contacted guards since the last check-in, our last show, as Day Thomas confirmed he will be back. Dan Skilling confirmed he will be back and said this is probably going to be his last year in the sport before he goes to the NBA ranks or tries to pursue the NBA ranks. And do we have anything else pop up, Neil? I don't think Aziz Bandega said that he would be coming back.
Josh Reed announced he will be returning as well.
Yeah, Josh Reed also said he would be coming back. Key depth piece for Cincinnati. And they reached out to Mississippi State guard Shaquille Moore, graduate transfer, put up 8 points per game last season, 2.2 rebounds on 47% shooting. They also reached out to Ohio State sophomore guard Roddy Gale Jr. That's an interesting name for me. 45% shooting, 28.4% from deep, 14 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, and also reached out to sixth man aficionado and one of the best bench players in the country, USF's Selton Miguel. Miguel really, really strong last season, 14.7 points, 3.2 rebounds, 2.2 assists at 6'4". So very interested to see how those continue on. And it just keeps cooking, Neil. Keeps cooking. And as you mentioned, a little bit of patience, people. You got to have a little bit of patience. The staff wasn't fully in on the transfer portal as much as you 1,000% could be until just last week when they wrapped up their season completely coming off the NIT. So the first commitment I expect in the next 10 days. And then if we get 10 days from now and there's nothing going on, maybe you start to worry a little bit. But as Neil just said, April 17th, April 20th, April 19th, April 18th, in due time, they will get a new player on the roster to start filling out this depth. Spring game storyline. What does the offense look like, or what are we expecting from the offense? We'll get to that after this message on Bearcat Blitz. Neil, spring winding down in the football ranks as the visits have been coming aplenty. Recruits all over the place, and Bearcats talents getting sharpened on the football field. My top spring game storyline, what am I looking for most out of this offense, is just how comfortable does Brendan Sorsby look in the timing and the just down to down minutia of this offense. It should be pretty well hammered home, cemented, finalized from last year to this year, and you have a full diet menu that you could give Sorsby to kind of go through and assess. There have been some injury missing players on the offensive line. That has been an issue throughout the spring so far. So I don't expect the chemistry to be amazing on that front. Maybe there's a couple sacks here or there. Maybe there are some points and some snaps where Sorsby looks a little confused and things go a little awry. But overall, I'm looking at Sorsby, who, I mean, and Neil, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's his job. He's the starting quarterback. I don't see any path to Brady Lichtenberg getting this starting job over a guy that they're already paying NIL money, significant NIL money to be here. Lichtenberg would have had to just blow the viewers out of the water with his play this spring and throughout the summer. And he's kind of just looked like solid. He's looked like Brady Lichtenberg. He's made some nice plays here and there. He's looked like a guy that can be firmly asked upon to play backup quarterback and come in that backup role if needed throughout the season. But Sorsby is the guy in my eyes, and he's a guy that I'm hoping to see not necessarily mastery of the offense, but strong capability within it, strong capability with the minutia and the language that you can build on and really finalize at Camp Higher Ground in just a couple months' time. What do you got, Neil?
Yeah, overall, I'm right there with you at the quarterback position. I really like what you had to say there about Brendan Sorsby, but overall, I'm going with the tight end position, Russ. And I mean, we looked at this tight end room last season, and it was a group that had a lot of uncertainty. And obviously, you had Joey Belgian transferring from Western Kentucky alongside Shimon Mateer. And then you had Peyton Singletary last season. Well, Joey Belgian goes down in the early half of spring ball last season. So he was a redshirt throughout this whole season, wasn't even able to see the field, didn't start his rehab until late in the season. But now this tight end position room, Russ, it's interesting. You go out there, you add a big target in Joe Royer, and guys, he looks two part of an NFL tight end. And I think anybody can, big guy, 6'5", 255 pounds. And it's a red zone threat. And then you get Joey Belgian back. And the thing that we were hearing, Russ, before the injury last spring was how well and efficient he could be used in the red zone. And that was something that stood out on his Western Kentucky film. And then you go out and you get a guy like Gavin Grover, a true freshman who stands 6'6" and moves like a wide receiver, Russ. And I mean, me and you have talked about it. We've looked and we're like, if you're standing behind this kid, are you thinking he's really 18 or what?
Right.
But Gavin Grover has looked like he has put on a solid 15, 20 pounds since being on campus since January. And I would not be surprised, Russ, if we see significant playing time for those three tight ends at any point in the season, depending how the packages mix up and whatnot. But Gavin Grover being that tall and that physical, Russ, it could get very interesting at that tight end room. And I mean, last season when we saw the depth go down, I don't think people remember, but Trevor Radozovic was our backup tight end at one point.
Yeah, he became the blocking tight end.
He became the blocking tight end when Shimon got banged up. Peyton Singletary got banged up. Barrick Falk went down with an injury. So there was no depth at that tight end position, guys. If they pulled an offensive lineman to be that blocking tight end, and I mean, it worked. I mean, props to Trevor Radozovic for being able to make that switch, but looking at this tight end room from this year, Russ, it's night and day difference from last year. Night and day difference. I mean, obviously, a lot of people would have liked to keep Shimon Mateer just because of the potential he had, and now he's at Colorado. But you add a guy like Joe Royer, Joey Belgian's back healthy, then Gavin Grover there as well, and then you get the returning depth pieces behind him. What Coach Stepp is doing there in that tight end room, Russ, I think a lot of people are going to be put on notice heading into this 2024-25 season, because just imagine if they had a healthy tight end last season that was able to go out there and do a lot of different things. Shimon Mateer was banged up all season, and when he did get going, he's shown flashes of what he is capable of doing, which I'm sure they'll see a lot of him out at Colorado. But man, Russ, that tight end position, that's the position on the offensive side of the ball that's got me pretty fired up as spring ball comes to a conclusion.
And Neil, what was this team's biggest issue on offense last season? Once they got in the red area, it was a disaster, an unmitigated disaster. Once they entered conference play, they didn't have any consistent options in the red area. And when you look at the wide receiver room this year, it's definitely deeper. It's much better, but it's not bigger. I would say that there's a definite size drop.
But it's worth noting that Xavier Henderson has looked to be that subpar wide receiver one, and I think it's no question. But Xavier Henderson
and I think Henderson's performance this spring, I mean, they've given him rest days here and there. Like, he's looked good. He looks like he's gotten better, gotten stronger. Yeah, he looks as healthy as you could be right now. So I think I don't know that they're gonna make many additions in terms of just trying to get more size in the transfer portal at receiver, because Henderson is that guy that you can rely on as your true X wide receiver to kind of move around the formation and throw the ball up to. But just the size in this tight end room is going to be huge. The depth in the tight end room is going to be huge. Gavin Grover, he's 6'6". I'm 6'6". He's a different 6'6" than my 6'6".
Different 6'6". Russ, I'm thinking he's looking more towards 6'8". If you're asking me, more 6'8".
Right, especially in pads,
8.5 kind of range, but he is massive.
He's a massive. And so I'm with you, Neil. I think that's a really big thing for fans to watch this weekend, is just the impact of the tight ends, how they're going to give more versatility to the offense and just allow them to do some more different things and allow you to kind of keep more depth along the offensive line this year, hopefully, because you're not tapping into a guy like Trevor Radozovic to come in and be your backup tight end. Going to be a lot of fun on Saturday. We'll touch on the defensive storylines on Thursday and get to whatever latest portal news there is out of Cincinnati Bearcats land in the basketball front. I'm your host, Russ Eltman. He's My co-host Neil Meyer. This has been Bearcat Blitz, presented by Bet Online.
This is the second. 15 seconds left. Shot clock off. 4-point game. DeJulius puts up a three. Yes!